no al cambio de régimen que nos recuerda tanto a las fallidas guerras eternas de Afganistán, Irak, Libia. Y pare usted de contar.
Drugs, terrorism, national security. Different slogans, same outcome. US troops, a foreign capital, an invasion, and a leader removed. It's a pattern decades in the making.
I directed our armed forces to protect the lives of American citizens in Panama and to bring General Noriega to justice in the United States.
On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against Al-Qaeda terrorist training camps and military installations of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. Saddam Hussein and his sons must leave Iraq within 48 hours. Their refusal to do so will result in military conflict, commenced at a time of our choosing.
Late last night and early today, at my direction, the United States Armed Forces conducted an extraordinary military operation in the capital of Venezuela.
Before 1999, relations between Washington and Caracas were largely pragmatic. Venezuela held the world's largest proven oil reserves and was a reliable supplier of crude to the US. Even after the country nationalized its oil industry in 1976, American companies remained deeply embedded there through investments. Through the 1980s and 90s, Venezuela ranked among Washington's top crude suppliers, making it a cornerstone of US energy security. That relationship shifted with the election of Hugo Chavez. Elected in 1999, Chavez openly challenged US foreign policy, rejected US influence in Latin America, and pushed Venezuela towards political and economic independence. Caracas called it sovereignty. Washington saw defiance.
No respetan nada ni respetan a nadie. Denuncio una vez más ante el mundo el atropello imperialista del gobierno de los Estados Unidos contra el pueblo venezolano y contra el gobierno venezolano.
From there, relations steadily unraveled. In 2002, the US backed a failed coup against Chavez. Chavez stood firm, but the US imposed sanctions, arms embargoes, asset freezes, and diplomatic isolation. In the years that followed, Venezuela deepened ties with US rivals, including Cuba, Iran, China, and Russia. Nicolas Maduro entered politics through trade unions before joining the National Assembly in the year 2000 as part of Chavez's United Socialist Party. Under Chavez, he rose quickly, serving as foreign minister, National Assembly president, and vice president. After Chavez died in 2013, Maduro won a special election and inherited an economy already under severe strain. By 2014, protests erupted amid inflation, commodity shortages, and collapsing oil revenues. In 2015, President Barack Obama signed an executive order that laid the foundation for a long pressure campaign. US sanctions spread from state officials and businessmen to Venezuela's financial and oil sectors. Under US President Donald Trump, Washington's policy on Caracas hardened further. In 2017, Trump publicly raised the option of military intervention.
We're all over the world, and we have troops all over the world in places that are very, very far away. Venezuela is not very far away, and the people are suffering, and they're dying. We have many options for Venezuela, including a possible military option if necessary.
Venezuela's 2018 presidential election was mostly boycotted by the opposition. The US, along with a number of other countries, refused to recognize the results. In January 2019, Venezuela's opposition-led National Assembly declared its leader Juan Guaido interim president. Washington quickly recognized his parallel government and escalated pressure on Maduro. Sanctions targeted Venezuela's state oil company and billions in government assets were frozen. But Guaido failed to gain control. A short-lived uprising in April 2019 collapsed. By early 2023, his parallel government dissolved. In May 2025, Maduro secured a third term in another election largely boycotted by the opposition. Trump responded by canceling oil licenses that had allowed American companies to operate in Venezuela. At the same time, Washington intensified accusations that Maduro's government was linked to narcotics trafficking and other illicit activities.
Venezuela has been very bad both in terms of drugs and sending some of the worst criminals anywhere in the world into our country.
Venezuela has long featured as a key location in global drug trafficking assessments. In 2011, the UN identified it as a key transit route for cocaine from Colombia to North America and Europe. US authorities later accused senior Venezuelan officials of forging links with local cartels and armed groups. They alleged the existence of the Cartel of the Suns, named after military insignia worn by Venezuelan army generals. Washington claimed the network extended to politicians and military institutions. Caracas denied the allegations. In July 2025, the US Treasury designated the Cartel of the Suns a terrorist organization and accused Maduro of leading it. Days later, a $50 million reward was announced for information leading to his arrest. Venezuela rejected the move as politically motivated and unsubstantiated. The designation was followed by the largest U.S. military buildup in the Caribbean in decades. From August 2025, U.S. naval forces were deployed under Operation Southern Spear. Trump announced the first airstrike in September, targeting a vessel leaving Venezuela. By October, strikes expanded into the Eastern Pacific. By the end of the year, more than 115 people had been killed in dozens of operations, including the first strike on Venezuelan territory. Under Operation Southern Spear, the US also sanctioned oil tankers moving in and out of Venezuela. By January 9th, 5 tankers were seized. An estimated 2.5 million barrels of crude oil was seized from 4 vessels, while one was empty.
Entonces, es un conjunto de cosas que son falsas todas. Son narrativas para justificar una escalada, pero el objetivo no es la lucha contra el narcotráfico. El objetivo es entrar y apoderarse de Venezuela, imponer autoridades coloniales en Venezuela y hacer un cambio de régimen en Venezuela para apoderarse de la inmensa riqueza petrolera y gasífera de Venezuela. Ese es el objetivo.
In the early hours of January 3rd, U.S. forces launched a coordinated assault in Caracas. Under a communications blackout, aircraft and special forces moved simultaneously. Within 2 hours, Maduro and his wife were taken into U.S. custody. They were flown to the USS Iwo Jima, transferred to Guantanamo Bay, then taken to New York, where the Venezuelan president awaits trial on federal charges, including narco-terrorism and cocaine trafficking. To carry out the U.S. strikes on Caracas, Trump needed to bypass Congress, and did so by citing a reworking of the Monroe Doctrine to justify the operation, dubbing it the Donroe Doctrine. Supporters say it is aimed at restoring order in Venezuela. Critics say it formalizes unilateral intervention and U.S. dominance across Latin America. Another doctrine now under scrutiny is Kerr-Frisbee. Under international law, abducting a foreign leader would normally violate national sovereignty and presidential immunity. Kerr-Frisbee allows U.S. courts to prosecute a defendant regardless of how he or she is brought into custody. The doctrine was used in 1989 after the U.S. seized Panama's Manuel Noriega. Maduro's case adds a new layer, however. The U.S. does not recognize him as Venezuela's legitimate president, arguing arguing he isn't entitled to immunity. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres raised concerns that Washington was not respecting international law. UN Political Affairs Chief Rosemary DiCarlo read out Guterres' statements during a special Security Council session.
I remain deeply concerned that rules of international law have not been respected with regard to the 3 January military action. The Charter enshrines the prohibition of the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state.
Legal opinion remains divided as the trial moves forward, but whether Maduro's forced transfer to the US is unlawful remains fiercely contested among international law experts. After the raid, Trump's rhetoric escalated across the region. He accused Colombia, Mexico, and Cuba of fueling instability and crime.
Colombia is very sick too, run by a sick man who likes making cocaine and selling it to the United States. And he's not going to be doing it very long, let me tell you. Mexico has to get their act together because they're boring through Mexico, and we're going to have to do something. We love Mexico to do it. They're capable of doing it. But unfortunately, the cartels are very strong. Cuba looks like it's ready to fall. I don't know if they're going to hold out. But Cuba now has no income. They got all of their income from Venezuela, from the Venezuelan oil. They're not getting any. And Cuba literally is ready to fall.
Critics argue control over the world's largest reserves, just 1,900 kilometers from U.S. shores, has always been central to Washington's Venezuela policy. Trump made Washington's objective explicit. He warned of further military operations if Maduro's inner circle doesn't cooperate with U.S. demands, which largely focus on obtaining Venezuelan oil.
They took our oil right. We had a lot of oil there. As you know, they threw our companies out, and we want it back.
Trump said the U.S. would refine up to 50 million barrels of Venezuelan crude oil and sell it at market value, using a portion of the proceeds towards building up Venezuela's new transitional government. At the White House, Trump invited America's top oil industry executives to discuss plans to rebuild and revive Venezuela's oil industry. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the Trump administration has a 3-step plan for Venezuela.
Step 1 is the stabilization of the country. We don't want it descending into chaos. The second phase will be a phase that we call recovery, and that is ensuring that American, Western, and other companies have access to the Venezuelan market in a way that's fair also. And then the third phase, of course, will be one of transition.
As part of the first step, Venezuela's Vice President and Oil Minister Delcy Rodriguez was formally sworn in as the country's interim president, along with 283 lawmakers who were elected last May. For ordinary Venezuelans, life continues with caution. Some welcome Maduro's removal, while others remain skeptical. With Chavez's legacy still embedded in national politics, Venezuela's future remains uncertain.
Si hay algo que el pueblo venezolano y que este país tiene muy claro, es que jamás volveremos a ser esclavos. Es que jamás volveremos a ser colonia de ningún imperio, del tinte que sea.